business. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I've been joined by the other council members, Herb Wesson and John Perry. Unfortunately, I only have for you a committee of one for the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. Councilmember Weiss and Councilmember Huiza will not be here today, so the planning and land use work will be presented as a report to the council. That being said, I know there's many folks here on the, or at least some folks, I think it's item 10, it's one of the item I saw there's cards, and we could have you speak today, but because it's a report from the committee chair, we will have to have a full public hearing in front of the council as well. So you can choose to speak now, then again in council, but since we're going to have many items as a joint committee, we'll be here a while, and you can speak in council. You have to be here all afternoon waiting for that item to come up, given a rather healthy list of speakers we have for item 1. So we'll be here hopefully before the Laker game begins. But that being said, I think we had a hearing the last time with another Laker game, didn't we?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to invite our chairman for the Housing and Community Development Committee, Councilmember Herb Wesson, and we're joined by Councilmember John Perry, and I happen to be on that committee as well. So it looks like we have a quorum on that committee.
Yes, we do.
You can push the button there. That one, there you go. There,
Okay, where we have our committee, Mr. Chairman, we don't have these newfangled microphones. You just talk and somehow you get heard. I want to welcome everyone that's here today as we, I think, really begin the process in trying to come up with some kind of balanced approach that will address the need for affordable housing and also be balanced so that those who develop this housing receive some kind of incentives. At the end of the day, we hope that this is a win-win situation. I do want to say for those of you that are here that for so many years have been trying to see if you could take this dream and make it a reality. I think this is the first real step in moving forward, and at this point in time, I'm optimistic at the end of the day, if we do this right, that we will be successful. So, Mr. Chairman, it's an honor to be here with you. I really do not believe we would be this far ahead, and I really don't believe we would be successful if we didn't have your guidance and your experience and your commitment to this issue. I would think there are a lot of people that know for several years you've been committed to do this, and I think just because you're a key part of this process, you elevate the comfort level of a lot of people. And so it's been a pleasure working with you. This is the first step, not the last step, but I'm optimistic at the end of the day, people will be amazed at what we accomplish here. So with that said, I guess Ms. Perry, who's been a member of my committee, is here, and I'm glad that Ms. Perry's here for a variety of reasons, because in order to get this done, there has to be a level of trust on both sides. And I think, without a doubt, Ms. Perry has demonstrated this ability to move forward in a balanced approach, and she has a lot of respect from individuals from the business community. And at the end of the day, it will be the respect that Mr. Reyes has had for years, the respect that Ms. Perry has had for years, and we will blend that together and get this thing done, and it's my honor to play a small role in this. Ms. Perry?
Okay, she says let's play ball.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Wesson, and again, I appreciate your guidance. The level of cooperation right here is where we have agreed to do this joint hearing. So we have the planning committee as well as the housing committee as one session, so we can try to move this as quickly as legally possible. We do have quite a few cards, but we would like to do, and Councilman, if you feel comfortable, we can have the departments give their report. We can start with the planning, then we can have the housing. The planning will give us the zoning parameters, the land use, the planning discipline that goes along with this policy, and also we can hear from the housing department as to their report, and then from there we can do the hearing, and then we can set forth directives to start the traction that many of us have been waiting to see.
I will follow your lead on this, Mr. Chair. I'm your wingman on this one.
Before we go to the item, I'd like to read it into the record, so we can let the public know what the item is on the outside.
I'm sorry?
We're going to read the item out for the record.
Okay.
Item number 1 was referred back to from council, was a report, a joint housing and planning report. And since then, we had a report from the director of planning relative to the development of citywide mixed income ordinance pursuant to the motion Wesson Reyes Garcetti.
Okay, thank you. Only because we have some folks here waiting on other items. Councilman, if I can just break for a second.
Oh, let's go right ahead.
Jump into planning. It's a report of one. We can dispense with some of the items to make sure folks that are here waiting for those items understand where we're at, and then we can get back to item 1. So that being said, items 2, 3, 4, we will be referring to the Bureau of Engineering. That's item number 2. And number 3, we'll refer to the Planning Department. Number 4, we'll be referring to the Planning Department. 5, we don't have any speaker cards on that item, but I do believe the fire department is here on item 5. So the action here, as reported, would be to approve the city attorney, approve and have the city attorney prepare an ordinance. But I'd like to hear from the fire department if they feel compelled to speak on this issue. And no, you don't? So we're fine? Okay, so thank you again for making time for joining us today. So that'll be the action item number 5. Item 6 is called special. On 6, actually, we don't have any speaker cards, and what I'd like to do is approve the planning department's recommendation and have the department provide periodic updates on that item. And Roberto, you want to read into the record just so everyone is clear what that item is on 6?
Yes, council members. Item 6 is a report from the planning department. It's relative to SB 375, which is a bill that was signed by the governor, and it has to do with smart growth development. And what's before you is the planning department's timeline as to the actions that they will be taking. Okay, and questions will be provided at that time from the council, since this will have to be heard again anyway, given the lack of quorum. Item 7. No cards on 7. We can move it as a consent item.
Yes, sir.
Number 8, as a consent item, seeing no cards. Item 9, we can move this as a report to the council without a recommendation, given there is no quorum. And we don't see any cards here. 10, there are a few cards on this item,
So item 10 will come back to you after item 1. I want to thank Director Goldberg. She gave an extensive report in the last meeting, and for the sake of timing, we'll have a report on the next Planning Committee meeting. 12 is a closed session item, and we'll hold back on number 12. So what's left on the agenda is item number 10, and we'll hear that after item number 1. That being said, we'll go back to item number 1, and Roberto, want to read into the record what item 1 consists of?
Yes, Councilmember. Item 1 is a report from the Planning Department. I believe there's also LAHD will be weighing in. It has to do with a citywide mixed income ordinance pursuant to a motion of Wesson, Reyes, Garcetti.
Okay. Okay, so let's hear from the departments first. We'll ask Planning Department and Housing Department. I know we're doing a cooperative effort here. And so that being said, Director Goldberg.
Thank you very much, Chairman Reyes, Chairman Wesson, and Committee Member Perry. Today we are here to respond to a council motion from October that directed this work program to create an ordinance for mixed income housing and also to form a technical advisory committee to help us look at the feasibility of whatever alternatives we come up with over the next few months. Today we're here just to give you a status report, mostly on the work that came out of the technical advisory committee and the work from the consultants that we have hired to advise us. We have been working closely with the Housing Department, and we expect to continue that effort. I would ask Jane Blumenfeld to come to the podium, give you a brief overview, and introduce the consultants who will do the reports.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm just going to give you a 2-minute overview of what our report proposes to discuss and interview and introduce the consultants who will each give their piece of the report. In your motion directing us to create a task force, we did that per the people that were directed on your motion. And the task force, I just want to clarify the purpose of the task force, even though some people in this audience came to the task force, but it wasn't a task force about the policy and the issues of mixed income. It was purely about the financial aspects of developing market rate housing. So on the committee, on the task force were for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, lenders, and people involved in financing such developments. And they, per the motion, they looked at the financial feasibility of different types of housing products we build in Los Angeles, from wood frame construction to medium to high rise, and they concurred, the task force members concurred essentially on pro formas for each of these types of developments in a normalized market. And we had hired consultants, one of which was Kathy Head from Kaiser Marston, who will give 5 minutes on what we learned from the task force, what they accomplished. We also hired outside legal counsel, and Barbara Kautz will introduce as we go along to help identify all the legal issues involved in developing the mixed income ordinance. And then the last piece that's important to understand as we proceed are the California Environmental Quality Act issues, and Mary Decker from the City Attorney's Office is here to discuss what those mean for the purposes of going forward and creating policy and establishing ordinance. So the consultants, our outside consultants in particular, have worked on many dozens of ordinances, mixed income ordinances throughout California. So I think as you have questions, they'll be able to answer from their perspective of many cities doing many different kinds of things in this arena. So first, Kathy Head will talk briefly about the task force and what occurred there.
Hello. I'm Kathy Head. I'm the managing principal of the Los Angeles office of Kaiser Marston. And my job today is just to discuss why the task force got together and what they did, and then how that bodes for the future of looking into the feasibility of adopting some sort of a mixed income ordinance. So what I want to focus on today is the fact that the task force formed 2 subgroups as part of the task force that were for-profit developers, ownership developers and rental developers.
I'm sorry, only because the acoustics are such,
Okay.
you can just be close to the microphone and people will be able to hear you a little bit better.
You want me to be, okay.
I
Wow,
think it's
nobody's
just a little bit
ever
close.
told me I was too quiet, so that's,
Okay.
this is a first. It's a banner day for me, thank you. Anyway, so we had an ownership pro forma and rental pro formas created by the for-profit developers. And then those pro formas were brought to me, and then I vetted those pro formas for reasonableness of assumptions. And so I manage the affordable housing practice for Kaiser Marston, so, and as Jane said, I've done literally 20 ordinances in the last 5 years, so I've seen an inclusionary or a mixed income ordinance or 2. So one of the key findings out of the subgroups of the task force was, and I think this is pretty self-evident, is that right now there is not a lot of development opportunity available region-wide. So this is actually a really, in my mind, an excellent time to be trying to put together a mixed income ordinance, because you don't have that rush of everybody wanting to develop very quickly. And so you have an opportunity to plan and to create a good format for your ordinance. And so what the task force subgroups did was they created prototype pro formas for different product types, for high intensity, low intensity, middle intensity, and then they ran it at all market rate, and then they ran it with a variety of income and affordability restrictions. The purpose of those pro formas is to then, as we go forward, help us use those as a format to be then, when we establish a range of potential policies, to test what the impacts of those policies will be. So that was the primary function. And there was real consensus among the for-profit developer group that the pro formas accurately reflected today and a normalized market. Now, a caveat that I would offer is that they were based on the kind of returns that would be needed for a developer to be feasible today, and those returns will vary over time. And so when you do any kind of mixed income ordinance, you need to look at how the variables that impact development change over time. So this is a good static analysis, and it's a good place to start, but it's not the analysis you'll use forever. Things will change. Just as a brief aside, there was then a group of nonprofit developers who were also on the task force, and they created another set of pro formas. And I think those pro formas were equally valid as the pro formas created by the for-profit developers, but they came from a different perspective. They came from the nonprofit affordable housing development perspective that gets help from a variety of available outside funding sources. And the for-profit group is the group who's really going to be impacted by any kind of ordinance. The affordable group's already doing what your ordinance would require and more. So both were excellent tools, and both will be considered on a going forward basis. I think a key thing to keep in mind when you start any kind of mixed income ordinance is it will have an impact on the development market. That is just simply true. There is no sort of scenario where you impose a new kind of requirement and it has no impact. It's going to impact somebody. It's going to impact landowners or developers or buyers or renters or all of them. And so that just needs to be considered. And there are a variety of offsets that can be provided that help mitigate those impacts, but you really need to start from a perspective from the get-go that there will be some impact. So the idea is create an ordinance that is creative enough and reflects the unique characteristics of your community so that developers can still develop, so that you don't impede production, so that you can get as many units built as fast as possible while achieving your goal of affordability. And so from my perspective in setting up an ordinance, that's your end game, and that's where you want to end up. And so the notion is, going forward, is what are those requirements? What's the range of requirements that can work without creating an onerous burden? What's not going to stop development completely? What's going to make, you don't want landowners just saying, I'm just going to keep my land in its current state. It's worth more to me as it is today than it would be worth to me with these requirements, versus we need to get affordability. My point being, and I'll sum up with it, is you just need to make sure that you understand everyone's perspective when you put this together, and so that you can share the burden and you can share the benefit. And so I'm available for questions afterwards.
And the second part that's critical to consider as you go forward are the Sql issues. And as we write an ordinance, the ordinance itself needs some kind of Sql analysis. And Mary Decker from the City Attorney's Office is going to point out what the key considerations are with regard to that.
Good afternoon. Mary Decker, Deputy City Attorney. The Planning Department has asked me to describe briefly two aspects of the report. One would be to summarize an overview of the Sql statute, what are its principal parts and how it gets implemented. That we'll be following in the future. And the second is the relationship between a mixed income ordinance and the existing state density bonus law and how that potentially affects the Sql analysis. To begin with the Sql overview, Sql, the statute, envisions a three-part process. Initially, you determine what your project is under Sql. That would be the definition of the ordinance itself. Once you get a clear and unchanging description of what you're proposing to do, and it's a Sql project, the first thing you look at, the first step, is whether any exemption from environmental review applies. There's numerous exemptions under state law, and the first step is a review of those exemptions to see if environmental review is required. If it's not, your compliance with Sql is completed at that point. If it's not subject to any of the exemptions, you move to the second step, which is normally an initial study analysis to determine if there are any potentially significant environmental effects that will result from the project. If there are none, you would complete a document called a negative declaration that comprises that analysis. If there's a potentially significant effect from the project that can be mitigated through some conditions imposed on the project to reduce that effect, you prepare a document called a mitigated negative declaration. Now, if you conclude through your initial study analysis that there's potentially significant environmental effects that can't be mitigated, that's where you get into the third step of the Sql scheme. That's the preparation of the environmental impact report, which is the most detailed analysis of the effects and has the most procedures associated with it under state law. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that the distinction between the negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration and the preparation of the environmental impact report. There is a provision in state law that says if you have competing experts who present evidence to the decision-making body that disagrees on the significance of an environmental effect, then you are required to prepare an environmental impact report rather than choosing to do a mitigated neg dec. The second point that I wanted to briefly summarize is the relationship between the mixed income ordinance and state density bonus law called Senate Bill 1818. That law was modified in 2005 and then amended each subsequent year after that for the last 3 years in a row. One of the issues that's been identified to date is the degree to which the city's adoption of a mixed income ordinance will encourage project applicants to opt into the state density bonus law rather than staying within the mixed income ordinance of the city. Now that has a potential impact because under the state density bonus law, there are mandatory requirements if the applicant chooses to proceed under that law that will increase the density for market rate housing projects that include a percentage of units that are set aside as affordable. The state density bonus law also includes reductions for parking. those are considered mandatory requirements if the project is being handled under the state density bonus law, meaning there's no environmental review related to the increase in the density or the parking reduction. So one of the items that's been identified for analysis and in essence for forecasting is the degree to which the adoption of a mixed income ordinance by the city will trigger increased use of that state density bonus law, and whether or not that would result in any potentially significant environmental effects because of the requirements of that law.
Okay, and lastly, we hired outside legal counsel to assist us in this very focused aspect of the law, and we engaged the services of Barbara Kautz from Goldfarb and Lippman, and her office is in Oakland, and she's come here and she's been very accessible, advising us on legal issues that we need to consider as we move forward. So, and she's going to summarize what really was in the report, the legal issues. Barbara.
Okay.
Excuse me, Chairman Reyes and Chairman Webson and Councilmember Perry. We also have an office in downtown Los Angeles, which I've been working out of, and we enjoy a lot. As Jane mentioned, our firm has an emphasis on affordable housing, and the staff report has an analysis of some of the legal issues involving mixed income ordinances, and I only want to make a few additional points here. One is that mixed income ordinances have been a focus of litigation by property rights groups, the Building Industry Association, and the home builders. Of 8 recent cases I can think of, 7 were brought by one of those 3 groups. And so the point there is that the groups that are opposed to mixed income ordinances feel strongly about them and have the capacity to bring litigation. And so for that reason, you know, they're probably something that cities do that we're a little more careful about. So what are they, you know, what arguments have they made? One, and probably the one they make more often, is that mixed income ordinances need to be treated more like impact fees or parkland dedication fees than like zoning requirements. I think cities have typically adopted them to be like zoning requirements, but the opponents argue that they need to be related to the impact of market rate housing on affordable housing. Now, there are some impacts because market rate housing uses up land, creates a need for some jobs. There was a recent case involving the city of Patterson that gave, I would say, some credence to the view of the building community, although it didn't involve inclusionary ordinances specifically, just in lieu fees. And the consequence of that is, I think, that we're all being more careful in terms of adopting the ordinances and the kind of evidence that's provided to justify them. A second issue that's been raised is whether a mixed income ordinance is subject to state rent control laws, which doesn't permit rent control to be imposed on new housing for the most part. And there's a current case involving the City of Los Angeles and the Central West Specific Plan, Palmer v. City of Los Angeles, where that claim is being made that the city can't apply its mixed income requirements to that specific plan. And that case is currently in the Court of Appeals. The ACLU and a number of other groups have filed a brief in support of the city, but we need to see what happens with that. And, you know, the outcome of that case, I think, could affect a lot how the mixed income ordinance ends up being structured. And the last issue is really how the density bonus laws interact with the mixed income ordinance, which Mary Decker has talked about. One positive way in which they interact is that because the density bonuses and the various incentives that are providing, you could say, make up for a lot of whatever cost the developer might experience, not entirely, but much of it, due to the mixed income ordinances, the density bonus law actually might make the mixed income ordinance more supportable, more legally defensible. The staff report has a number of recommendations about, you know, how to create an ordinance that's most likely to withstand a legal challenge. A lot of them are common sense, providing incentives, providing alternatives, having a good record. minimizing discretion and really continuing the city's existing policy about mixed income and density bonuses. So we think it's quite possible for the city to adopt a defensible ordinance, but it's just something where, because of the amount of litigation, a little bit of care is required. Thanks.
Yolanda Chavez is here from the Housing Department. I'm just the MC. Thank you, Jane.
Good afternoon, Yolanda Chavez with the Housing Department. Just very briefly, I wanted to let you know that, as you know, you actually directed the Housing Department on April 28th to also hire a consultant to review the performa analysis that was done by the Technical Advisory Task Force. That consultant is working on this analysis. It's David Nahas with Veloci Partners. He's one of our underwriting consultants that's been on contract with the department for several years now. We expect this analysis to be completed within 2 weeks, and we'll be submitting that report to you. And then prior to that, talking to the consultant that's been hired by planning to ensure that if there are any differences in the analysis, they can either come to some agreement or at least be able to come forward with those disagreements and with an explanation. Finally, I think that we would ask that you add maybe another guideline or parameter into your amendment, and it's partly because, as you know, part of the responsibility once we have an ordinance, part of the department's responsibility is that we monitor all of the units for the period of affordability. So we would be the department responsible for ensuring that for the period, whether it's, I'm assuming would be 30 years, that those property owners and management companies are complying with the income requirements for those units. We would just add an additional guideline if the Director of Planning would be so kind to add to her report, which would ensure that the ordinance that is developed can efficiently and effectively be enforced and monitored. In closing, we would just say that we look forward to working with the Planning Department to develop an ordinance that is financially feasible, reasonable, and flexible. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that conclude the presentations? Okay. Okay, great. At this time, as you can see, we have quite a few cards on this item. We've had several public hearing processes in the past. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a 1 minute period for speakers. When you come forward, please give us your name and address. And as you can tell, the acoustics are not the greatest in this room, so we really need to get as close as you comfortably can to the microphone to articulate your points. Now, if there's someone who has said something beforehand and right before you, it's okay to say I agree with the previous speaker and raise any new points you might want to make. So, that being said, I'd like to call up the Mayor Zaragoza's Deputy Mayor, Helen Garrett, and following her, we'll have Maria Elena. And following her, we'll have Tony Salazar. Ms. Hestwick, the microphone is yours. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the acoustics may be bad, but it's a gorgeous room.
I know, isn't it?
Thank you, members of the council. Helmi Hestwick, Deputy Mayor for Housing. I wanted to, first of all, thank you all for your leadership on this very important issue. This is something that has been discussed for many years, and the mayor is very pleased to be working with all of you on this important ordinance. I also want to take the time to thank publicly the Technical Advisory Committee for their volunteer time and effort to take a look at financial feasibility and market rate housing development and how this would affect it. And also the valuable time and energy put in by the Planning Department, Gail Goldberg, by the Housing Department, Mercedes Marquez and Yolanda Chavez and Jane Blumenfeld, I should also mention, of the Planning Department, and their very, very thoughtful consideration of this matter. I know that this is the beginning of a process, but it also, in many respects and for many people, is not. This is a process that began many years ago, and I want to just acknowledge that this has been something that has been discussed for over a decade in the city of Los Angeles, and during the time that we've been discussing it, the housing crisis has grown worse. In September of 2008, the mayor released a housing plan, and in the housing plan, he called for a mixed income ordinance. I have taken that housing plan around to community meetings throughout the city of Los Angeles and talked specifically about the issue of mixed income. And so what I am presenting to you today is a series of community meetings, 6 community meetings where we met with over 400 constituents of Los Angeles to talk about this and other issues. And I wanted to highlight a few of the outcomes of those meetings. First of all, the respondents were asked to rate the importance of issues, and they consistently ranked mixed income as very important. It was the highest number of respondents across every area of this city. The respondents also indicated that the mixed income policy should apply to new buildings with 10 or more units. More than 2/3 of the people involved in these community meetings indicated that the buildings of 10 or more units should all require affordable housing. Additional respondents indicated over 20 and then over 50 units would be a good threshold. Respondents indicated that the mixed income policy should target households that make less than $60,000 per year, and many supported a lower income. I'm leaving copies of the report with its analysis for your consideration. I know it's not a public hearing, but I think it is a thoughtful conversation with constituents of Los Angeles, and I hope that you do consider it. I just want to leave with one thought. As I was listening to Kathy Head of Kaiser Marston and listening to Barbara Kautz of the Goldfarb and Littman and discussing the impacts on the market for doing this policy, I think it is extraordinarily important for us to take a look at the impacts to the development market if we go forward with this policy, and I know that the council will look thoughtfully at all sides of the issue. But I also want us not to forget to take a look at the impacts of not doing this policy. We have spent many years in this city underbuilding affordable housing, and this is an opportunity for us to pivot in a new direction and look forward to a decade of new policies, good policies that bring about housing for the working people of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Southwick. Councilman, any questions or my Deputy Mayor? No.
No, I'm
Okay.
I'm comfortable with moving to public comment,
Okay.
if you'd like.
Yes. And I'd like to welcome Mariana Elena Durazo.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Members of the committee. I just want to add my voice to the many number of people who are here today and organizations in support of the mixed income housing policy. We have a group in labor that's specifically set up on the housing policy issue, and I got to tell you, it's becoming more and more important every single day. It used to be, for example, the building trades unions were involved in this because a policy like this would create more construction jobs. But that's not the case anymore. They are very involved because, for example, a business manager can tell you that when a worker gets to the point, an apprentice gets to the journey level, they can't afford to live in the city of LA, and they move outside of Los Angeles to be able to find affordable housing. Of course, this is another contribution to traffic and pollution and so many other issues. This is now middle-class union members, middle-class workers, teachers, nurses, and firefighters. Then you go to those who are at even lower level, like janitors, security officers, and hotel workers, where it's even more difficult for them to be able to survive. They have to live multifamily in a single apartment, and that's not where we should be as a city. So I just want to add that we are here to support this. We appreciate the components of a proposed potential policy, but we really urge ASAP. We urge ASAP and so that the city council could really move on this as fast as possible. And frankly, because of so many years that have gone by, shame on all of us if we can't come up with a policy sooner than later before more families are suffering. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you for your time. Our next speaker is Tony Salazar, Peter Dreyer, and Jesus Hermosillo. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, council members, thank you very much. I'm Tony Salazar, principal with the firm McCormick, Bear & Salazar, a national real estate development company. And I come before you today, as I have for the last 10 years, on this issue. And that is that we have developed over 124 developments around the United States in 25 cities. 60 of those are mixed income that involve people with tax credits or even in public housing living in and amongst people on market rate. And we're a rental housing developer. We use mixed use as well. And I'm here to say that I've been involved in this issue, and even many of my colleagues that were involved in the task force here have developed in areas that have mixed income housing policies. And we're doing that throughout the country. And I just want to say these three things. One is, I've never met a mixed income housing developer that went broke. There is in the, just a couple seconds, Mr. Chairman, the real estate values around mixed income developments have never dropped. And private investment, whether it's Wall Street, banks, or any other private investment, has never stopped going into cities. They will not do it when a mixed income policy is adopted here, and I can assure you development will continue, and they will be with the same developers. Lastly, I just want to present a minority paper from the task group that I was involved with to give you a different perspective on some of the numbers and some of the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salazar.
Can I leave this here?
Please, with Barbara. Barbara can make sure we make copies for the committee. Thank you very much, sir. Just give us your name and address.
Okay, my name is Peter Dreyer. I teach at Public Policy at Occidental College, where I chair the Urban and Environmental Policy Program. I was also a member of the task force that issued a report in 2000 recommending a mixed income housing policy, and prior to that I was the Director of Housing for the City of Boston, where I helped to formulate and implement an inclusionary housing law. So I just want to say three things very quickly. One is that it's been 10 years, and that in that time, if we had implemented an inclusionary zoning mixed income housing policy back when it was recommended in this report in 2000, we would have had over 10,000 affordable housing units built that we didn't. Number two, I hope you will consider who the opponents are of this ordinance, or at least of a strong ordinance, and just remind yourselves that in the mid-90s, the same people who oppose or want to weaken this ordinance, the Chamber of Commerce and the Central City Association, opposed a living wage law, said it would kill 4,000 jobs and destroy the economy. That didn't happen, and a mixed income housing policy will also have none of the negative consequences that people are claiming it will. And finally, I want to say that the mixed income housing policy that is under consideration should be considered part of workforce housing, that we need to have housing for the workforce. But the workforce in Los Angeles, half of all the people in LA earn less than $25,000. 75% earn less than $50,000. That's the workforce we need to deal with. And I have some prepared remarks that I will pass out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Veronica Perez-Becker.
Yes,
Michael Rudkin.
I'm sorry?
I'm just moving some folks behind you so we can line them up. So it's yourself and Veronica Perez-Becker, and then Michael Rudkin.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesus Hermosillo, and I live at 2676 East 8th Street in Boyle Heights. And I also work with Inquilinos Unidos, United Tenants, which is based in Westlake. And I want to express our strongest support for the strongest possible ordinance, setting aside 25% of units for at affordable incomes, including for people up to the 30%, what do you call it, AMI. Every day I talk to people at work who are being evicted from their homes because they have people in their units who are not on the contract, because so many of them are families that have had to double up. And this happens, they're coming to us from Pico Union, Westlake, Boyle Heights. In Boyle Heights, where I live, all of my neighbors consider me rich, because even though I'm paying a full 40% of my income in rent, I happen to be a rarity in that I have my own bedroom.
I think you'll wrap up. Thank you very much. Veronica Perez-Becker.
Veronica Perez-Becker, CCA. We applaud the city's efforts to encourage housing production at all income levels, especially for our middle class who keep our city's economic engine running. But we would like to underscore that a feasible mandate must be paired with the appropriate incentives to offset the costs of producing affordable housing. A sound proposal must be economically feasible in any kind of market, and this can only occur with the right incentives. We are encouraged to see that the city is ready to perform an environmental review. However, we are concerned that the study is being commenced before any concrete proposal has been presented. The initial proposal should be presented with enough time to have significant give and take with stakeholders, and we ask that the city continue to work with us to identify the appropriate incentives as we move forward in crafting the details of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Rapkin, Vicky Carlin, and Sister Diane Donahue. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm here today on behalf of the ACLU, including our Economic Justice Committee. Also, I'm an attorney formerly in private practice for 33 years representing landlords. The ACLU has had long-held beliefs that government policies and actions that result in the enhancement of a basic necessity of life, such as housing for some segments of the population, while denying or reducing its availability for others, may well be a denial of both equal protection of the law and due process. We favor government policies that provide for the availability of affordable permanent housing. We believe that local governments have an affirmative obligation to reform its housing policies and practice. One such reform for the city of Los Angeles is to support and grant housing not only to low-income people subject to but to government workers, teachers, mothers, and we believe that the policies that other cities have in California you will go along with on mixed income housing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Vicky Collins, Sister Diane Donahue, and then Jan Badenbach.
Good afternoon. I'm a constituent in Council District 11, speaking in strong support of the mixed income ordinance under discussion. As you move forward with this important work, I ask that you establish a set-aside of at least 10% for extremely low-income residents. That's not something that I've heard mentioned in the past. That you also ensure that all affordable units built with government privilege remain affordable and protected by covenant for a minimum of 30 years. Otherwise, affordability may be lost over time as properties change hands. Fourth, distribute mixed income projects throughout the city more evenly, with the focus at the major transit centers so that greater access to affordable housing can be achieved across the breadth of the city with the least unfavorable impact on the environment. And then finally, I'd ask that you institute a really solid tracking mechanism so you can safeguard against demolition of affordable units that can be preserved and also achieve a more level, even distribution of units across council districts and community plan areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sister Diane Donahue, John Badenbach, and then we'll have Lisa Helene, I believe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and
well,
thank you.
Congratulations, by the way. You had the Vice President visit your facility the other day.
Yes.
That's a great accomplishment, great work.
Thank you very much. I was here 20 years ago on the Blue Ribbon Committee that set up the Housing Department. I was co-chair 10 years ago with the group, the Housing Crisis Task Force. It's the same problem, and it's just getting worse. So my point is, let's move. And nine out of 10 of the new residents that were built in 2006 were affordable only for people that made $135,000. 9 out of 10. 50% of the workers make less than $25,000 a year. 50% of the workers in this city. We've got to do something that bridges that kind of inequity. And that's what I'm here for, and that's where we're going.
Thank you very
now.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Good afternoon.
Jan Breidenbach, formerly of Housing LA, the coalition that brought people here today, and presently teaching at USC. But I'm speaking for UCLA. The planning school at UCLA has just recently issued a new report on inclusionary housing ordinances in LA and Orange County. I won't go into details because obviously I don't have time, but there's an amazing statistic. These ordinances in this region are producing comparable numbers of units as the low-income housing tax credit, this nation's largest and most productive housing program. That places these types of ordinances, this kind of policy, right up there with major policy of this country. And I want to just say quickly, I'm a native. I was born in Hollywood. I've lived here all my life. I've watched LA become a global city. We are inclusive of all cultures, all languages, everything in the city. We need to have our housing be as inclusive as the rest of our city. We need to be a global city in all aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa Helene and Barbara Ehrenreich.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Helene Donovan. I'm a resident of Hollywood at 749 Serrano in Council District 4. I'm a member of our Mother of Good Counsel Church, board secretary for LA Voice, and therefore also part of Housing LA. And we're part of Housing LA because our faith, as LA Voice is a faith-based community organizing group representing 24 Christian and Jewish congregations, and our faith calls us to work together as brothers and sisters to ensure that everyone has a place at the table and a roof over their heads. We support mixed income housing, and I have 100 letters from organizations and citizens that agree with us. I want to share with you that I think today is the day that we need to move forward with this. We've heard about how long we have waited, and this weekend our president called us to align our deepest values and commitments with the values of a new age. In LA, let's make a new age mean a city that people can live in and thrive in, whether they make $25 million or $25,000.
Thank you. I'll be asking Councilman Weston to take on the speaker cards after this. The last speaker I'll be announcing is Barbara Ehrenreich. Is Barbara here? Okay. Councilman, you want to proceed?
Okay, until she comes back, let's have Maria Caballito, Beth Steckler, I think it's Lydia Ponce. Please come forward. And what was that last name? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Cabildo. I am a resident of Eagle Rock, California. I'm also the president of East LA Community Corporation located in Boyle Heights, 530 South Boyle Avenue. We have a building that has an 8-year waiting list. There is a huge need for affordable housing. And as Jan mentioned, the meaning that this project could be comparable to the low-income housing tax credit in terms of production. The affordable housing tax credit produced over 125,000 units a year. So just to give you a sense of the scale of what an ordinance like that could produce. It's very important that we get a mixed income ordinance passed now, and also an ordinance that's citywide so that residents who live in neighborhoods with very few opportunities have access to communities that are rich in opportunities. And that's very critical. And also, there is a need that is largely unserved right now at the extremely low income level. So it's my hope that this ordinance would be citywide, create access to opportunities for families, and serve families at the extremely low incomes. Thank you.
No, thank you. Beth?
Thank you. Beth Steckler with Housing LA. And I'd just like to
remind you of what Housing LA is pushing for. We're looking for a 25% ordinance that serves people at $23,000 a year and less. And as you've heard from previous testimony, half the workers make $25,000 or less. We're not looking for an ordinance that serves people who have a whole lot of housing choices and would like some more. We've got a lot of people out there that are hurting with very high levels of overcrowding, very high levels of overpaying. And if we had taken action, we really feel like the city's dragging its feet. We feel like this report that's being given is good, but it's not 6 months worth of work. And we'd like to know why it took 6 months and why aren't we moving quickly. We've already lost the opportunity for 10,000 units and we need to act now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lydia Ponce with Power. I'm a power leader from Venice, and I'll tell you about incentives, something that the TAC failed to mention. The incentive is to do the right thing. The economic feasibility is to save families and keep people housed and to make sure that we have a healthy city. Mixed income housing ordinance is the way to do it. It's just one of many measures. We need to keep what we have, save the Holiday Breeze apartments in Venice, the 15 affordable housing, the last within a mile of the beach along the California coast. We do not need to destroy or demolish what we have. We need to restore and renovate, and we need to get creative. I was paid a relocation fee. I moved out of an affordable housing, an apartment for my daughter, and I haven't found an apartment. It's not affordable. I'm on several lists. By the time my name comes up, I'm going to be a senior citizen, and maybe by then I'll be housed, but maybe I can come live with you. Maybe you'll have an extra room. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the city is going to look like when I become a senior citizen, and I'm not afraid. I have people, I have family, I have friends. You need to do whatever it takes. We need to act. No more planning, no more technical advisory, anything. We need to do something today.
Thank you. Now, is this Barbara?
Yes.
We had 2 cards on Barbara.
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm Barbara Ehrenreich. I am a journalist. I'm here in Los Angeles doing some reporting on the effects of the recession on people who are already struggling. And I was visiting Acorn. They asked me to come along today and make a brief comment. I would just say I was shocked to learn that Los Angeles, which is considered a progressive example to the country, does not have an ordinance like this requiring mixed income housing, when there are 170 other cities in California that do. I mean, we look to Los Angeles. With your living wage law, all over the country, there's a great respect for Los Angeles and what you have done for working residents. So please, don't let us down.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Ali Tons, Francisco de la Rosa, and Kathy Ramsey. Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Francesca De La Rosa. I'm with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. The creation of a mixed-income housing policy for the city of Los Angeles presents an important and critical opportunity to increase the supply of affordable housing for low and extremely low-income people, including homeless people and those at risk of homelessness. The number one strategy to addressing homelessness is the creation of deeply affordable rental housing. The city of Los Angeles has one of the largest homeless populations in the country, with an estimated 40,000 people on any given night. The primary cause of homelessness is poverty and the lack of access to affordable housing. Over 700,000 of our residents live in poverty. Currently, 200,000 of our residents are unemployed. A quarter of the city's households earn approximately $21,000 a year, and 1/3 pay more than 50% of their income in rent. Additionally, the homeless programs and the service providers that LAHSA serves have reported an increase in homeless families. We recognize that this ordinance alone will not solve homelessness, but we know it is an effective tool that can help reduce the number of homeless, get us new units that we need, and provide increased affordable housing options to homeless individuals and families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Ramsey. I'm a member of ACORN. My son Titus. And I'm here so that everyone can put a face to the crisis and the epidemic that we're in right now. I'm a single mother, and I've worked as a realtor for the last 11 and a half years. 8 years ago, I purchased my home in Canoga Park, in the San Fernando Valley. 2 years ago, I had a major decrease due to the job that I'm in, real estate and loan officing, of my income, and my home was foreclosed upon. My son and I were evicted in September 2008. We lived next door to the house that I once owned in a neighbor's bedroom, extra bedroom. So, although for months I attempted to work with my lien holder to stay in my home, to no avail. Today we're homeless. So it is really, really crucial for the move to be now. Something has to be done now. Families are losing their homes, 3,000 a week in just the county of Los Angeles. That has to stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Okay, I called out 3 names. I only got 2. So who do we miss? Was it Ali, Mr. Toms, Ali, or Mrs.? Okay, we'll kind of set that aside in case he comes back. That brings us to Pastor Carlton Rodin, Olivera Lambert Bush, Sashi Hanuman. Pastor?
Yes. My name is Carlton Roden. I'm the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Los Angeles, and our congregation resides in Councilmember Weston's district at 760 Southwest Moreland in Los Angeles, proudly. And I'm here to, one, say that we are members of LA Voice, and also we support the mixed income housing ordinance that Housing LA is talking about today. And I also just like to underscore something very interesting from a pastoral perspective. In the last several months, coming through the church's door, between 10 and 12 families have been coming asking for assistance with rent. Mainly, most of the folks asking for help are working, but have lost their residency. So I'm here to ask and urge you all to pass something now, that there is a crisis going on in the community, particularly where we are, and we cannot wait any longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you very much.
Olivera Lambert Bush. And what Bush family did you marry into?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Put the mic down, dear, to your mouth.
Olivia Lambert Bush, but not related to King George.
Okay.
Got it? Okay. So I have been I've been working in a NAP in the ghetto, or whatever you want to call it, in Watts for a long time. I worked there as a teacher and a job developer. I pay all my dues, did everything I had to do. I am retired now, and I've been living in the apartment where I live for more than 27 years. Okay, so lately, since those I have a rent control on that building, but the rent control is going up so high, and it's going up every year it go up, that pretty soon I would be paying $1,000 also. Besides that, being it's an old building and it have big bedrooms, the manager or the owner of the building is constantly trying to get me out of the building. Now I'm a senior citizen. Where am I going to go? My time is up.
No, I'll give you a few more minutes because I impinged on your time with the bush crack.
So what I'm saying is that if we don't come up with these mixed income housing, even senior citizen is going to suffer. Like I've been living there for 27 years. That time I was much younger. I pay my rent, I pay my taxes, I did everything. And now every move I make is to try to take me out of the apartment and to take other people out of the apartment. So I would really plead with you, beseech you, to try and do something, even if you have to work later at night. But we have to solve this problem.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Shashi Hanuman, attorney with Public Counsel Law Center. Public Counsel supports the adoption of a strong citywide mixed-income housing ordinance in the City of LA. When this joint committee approved the city's housing element last year, you approved a real plan to assure housing for all economic segments. A citywide mixed-income ordinance is a critical part of that plan. Without it, the housing element projects that we will barely be able to meet half of our need for low-income persons in the city. This is why we must support land use strategies, including mixed income and preservation, that don't cost the city a lot of money but still further affordable housing. New programs are also essential because existing programs are not working. As we've done with other land use ordinances, including adaptive reuse, we need to start the process of approvals and show our residents that we're serious about programs that have been proven across the state and the country to provide quality, safe, affordable housing. With respect to the Palmer decision that was discussed by Barbara Kotz and Gail Goldberg, the decision will be narrow. It's an as-applied challenge, and it will determine whether the Central City West requirement provides the benefits required in exchange for the required set-aside under Costa-Hawkins. In the latest round of filings, the challenger actually asked the court not to address the issue of inclusionary zoning statewide. We can and should draft a legally defensible ordinance. Now is the time to show we're serious.
Thank you. Thank you. Gigi Zabo, Holly Schroeder, Pat Powell, please come forward. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gigi Zabo with the Corporation for Supportive Housing. With over 40,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, every measure needs to be taken to produce more affordable housing. More disabled people, seniors, and families are slipping into homelessness every day because they're excluded from LA's high-income housing market. Now is the time to pass a citywide mixed-income policy that will require that 10% of new units be affordable to people homeless to making $25,000 a year. What will the next homeless count be if we do not act now?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Pat Powell, and I'm a resident of Venice. I'm a resident there for 60 plus years, and I'm here on behalf of my neighbors. I have neighbors that live in the Holiday Breeze apartments, 15 buildings, 246 families that are being evicted because of affordable housing. My heart is breaking. I am not a tenant in these buildings. I'm a landowner. In fact, I'm a landlord. I have about 6 units myself. But you know, there's something that we can do. My heart is really hurting for these people. These families I have known for many years, over 35 years. And it's just terrible to see the situation that they're in. And I know there is something that we can do. And I'm saying we, from all of us, there is something we can do. We need to do it now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council members, Holly Schroeder with the Building Industry Association. Great turnout today, a lot of interest in affordable housing, and I'd submit to you that a lot of the comments you're hearing are about affordable housing and not specifically about the mixed income ordinance, and it's very important that we recognize the difference. A couple of points I'd like to bring to your attention for you to think about, given what's going on in our current economy, the legal and the practical issues of doing mixed income ordinances are getting more and more difficult. You heard some of the legal issues in the report from the staff, but also there's also practical practical issues. It's very important that we craft incentives and offsets in order to make the fiscal responsibility of this not fall on just one sector. Obviously, this is a societal issue. That's why you have all these people out here today. We need to make sure we do a proper analysis, and including that environmental review that's being talked about. Our history is that a lot of policies that are intended to provide incentives for affordable housing are ending up in litigation. If we want to avoid that, we need to make sure that we do the proper record. And finally, it's really important to provide the offsets because our housing element approval is contingent upon it. That's according to a letter from HC&ED that we received in November. We want to make sure we stay compliant with our housing element. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Susan Stouffer, Bilal Ali. Uh-oh, I messed up. Barbara Monahan, is it Burke?
Yeah.
I'm Susan Stauffer. I'm here both as a citizen who lives around the USC area of town, but also as the director of the Peace Center at United University Church. And I'm here because my husband and I together, with our income, we are in that workforce below $50,000, and we just recently had to look for housing, and I've got to tell you, it's a really desperate market out there. When you're looking at one-room studios for $1,000 around that area, it's ridiculous. And I've got to tell you, in the circles in which we move, the people who come to our church every day asking for assistance, we are wealthy. And if this we totally support the mixed income zoning ordinance, but if it doesn't include our citizens who are at the lowest income brackets, these 50% of working people who are below this $25,000 a year, I don't know how we can go to bed at night and sleep in our own beds, because these are people who will end up on the streets, who will end up homeless, and these are our children who are taking minimum wage jobs and not having enough income to even afford a place to live. So I urge you, we've got to pass it, but we've got to pass it with enough for the people at the lowest income brackets.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Councilman. My name is Bilal Ali. I'm an organizer with Coalition LA, and I'm a resident of the Westlake area. I heard today about and it's commendable, you want to balance a balanced approach to this housing crisis. And just make sure that balance is not balanced on the backs of those who need the housing the most. Also, I didn't hear in the report about the strong housing preservation and rehabilitation strategy. When you speak about cost-effective, this has been proven to be a very cost-effective method in dealing with housing crisis. The need for a mixed-income housing is now. Without a mixed-income housing ordinance, we continue to suffer from overcrowding in our communities. We suffer from displacement. We suffer from people, low-wage earners paying over 50% of their income to afford housing. The time for a mixed and a strong mixed-income housing ordinance, along with a strong preservation strategy, is needed now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Monahan Burke, board member, Studio City Neighborhood Council and Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Council representative. From the task force inception, Neighborhood Council should be represented across the city, including a balance from the San Fernando Valley. Disproportionate SB 1818 housing with its exorbitant bulk and inordinate density has robbed us of our rent-stabilized, moderate-income workforce. Garden-style apartments which should be preserved. They had open space, and this is really important for people. TOPA is Studio City's preference for affordable housing. We would like to have that option, giving the tenants the right to purchase as a co-op, either to buy as condos or a co-op for rentals. The mayor's outreach for proposed mixed-income housing recognized the scale and character of individual communities should be respected. We do not need mandatory inclusionary zoning housing put forth again. I would like to say in Studio City right now we have an SB 1818 that is being proposed as family units, and they're 350 square feet. This is unacceptable for anyone to live in with a family.
Thank you for coming down. And last, we have Helen Garrett.
My name is Helen Garrett. I'm a proud member of POWER. I'm here because I live in inclusionary housing, 2 months away from having been homeless. I fought for and won inclusionary housing in the marina where it's very expensive to do that. If they can do it, you can do it. Now, as for inclusionary housing, we just heard from someone who said she didn't want inclusionary housing. Holiday Venice wants inclusionary housing. They want to buy their 15 buildings, 246 units, and they want to keep it low income. They want to keep it Section 8 forever. And they want inclusionary housing. I live in inclusionary housing. I never made it to the middle class, worked every day of my life from 18 until the present, and I still haven't made it to the middle class. If I didn't have inclusionary housing, I would be 68 years old and ill and on the street and living off of you.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I may have lost your card. Sometimes these cards stick together, but please come forward, identify yourself, and then for the record, if you could just fill out another quick card. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, council members, for allowing the Progressive Jewish Alliance to come before you. I'm Rabbi Craig Wyckoff. From Congregation.
I lost your card. I remember seeing your name. I apologize.
No problem.
Go on.
We presented you with a letter today that's in support of Housing LA's proposal. It's been signed by over 40 leaders representing a cross-section of Jewish life in Southern California. That list is growing on a daily basis. We're taught as Jews that no society is great unless it takes care of its weakest people. The poor, the young, the students, and the elderly. The elderly were taught from the Torah in the Ten Commandments to honor thy mother and thy father. The Mishnah, the Talmud teaches us that means when they are old and infirm, we provide them with housing. We provide them with shelter. Our society is dependent upon our future leaders, our students. Our poor, we're taught from the days of Abraham to have an open house. Every Jew is married under a chuppah that's covered on top and open on all sides. This is a symbol that our house is open for poor and people in need. We don't turn our backs on those people. Societies that have slipped away, the Greek culture, the Roman culture, the Byzantine Empire, the Babylonian, they were all cultures that didn't look after their people. Where do we as a culture intend to be in 50 years? Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Rabbi. And Rabbi, I just found your card. It was stuck to another card, so I do apologize. Oh, no, my pleasure. And again, thank you for coming. With that, I'd like to defer back to the chair of PLUM.
Thank you, Councilman Weston. I'd like to invite my colleagues. I know Councilman Carpenter had to begin his committee on gang youth and violence, so he did ask to be excused, and we know he had another commitment in that regard. But we do have Councilman Perry here, Councilman Weston, myself, and I wanted to open up any questions you might have or any comments based on what we've heard, or any questions for our consultants or the staff, Ms. Chavez or Jane. I mean, again, I'd like to open that up. Any questions, Councilmember? No questions? Councilor Weston?
No, I just want to, again, thank everyone for coming. And someone talked about how challenging this was. And we view it as challenging, but we're determined to move through this as quickly as we can. And we are of the belief that at the end of the day that we can bring something together. I can tell you now, without a doubt, it's not going to be everything that one side wants or the other. But we will do the very best that we can to do a balanced approach. And a balanced approach does not put it on the backs of one side or the other. So Mr. Chair, you may have some additional questions. I think that it's time for us to really move forward, take the first step in the right direction, and it's my understanding that we have collaborated and come up with some amendments that we want to give to the planning department, and I would be prepared to have you present those or however you...
Okay, we do have some directives, but I did want to make a couple of comments myself. This is my second run at this. 2001, 2002, there was a very, very strong effort to address the notion of housing for everyone in the city with a very purposeful and essentially pragmatic approach, but obviously it did not get to the place where it needed to be. We've learned a lot from that lesson, and today we are trying our best to approach this in just as purposeful manner with just as much intent to be inclusive with all the different stakeholders. And I just want to make sure that we promote a policy that does pay attention to all of the stakeholders, but that we do achieve a certain amount of balance, because there is a severe need in this city for housing. A las personas que están aquí que no tienen aparatos para traducir, les quiero decir muchas gracias por el sacrificio en llegando a este lugar hoy día. Reconocemos que mucha gente ha sufrido en el pasado por la falta de viviendas y que estamos haciendo todo lo posible para traer a cabo un póliza donde podamos ofrecer viviendas para la gente trabajadora, tanto como la gente de media clase, y también para las personas que también tienen fondos y que no están en situación tan grave. Pero ojalá con hoy nuestra acción podamos movernos de una manera donde podamos salir adelante con una póliza que nos va a traer un método para llevar a cabo más viviendas para todos. Since we didn't have any translation device, I just said I want to thank everyone that came here. I know the working folks and folks who have a hard time getting the commitments from work and home, that it's a sacrifice to be here, but I appreciate the presence here, and that we are going to be trying our best to provide a policy that has balance, and that we move forward in a policy that we do have housing for the working folks, and as much as the middle class and the higher income groups that do reside in the city. So we are looking for that balance. So that being said, there are some directives that I'd like to, and amendments that we'd like to put forth, and Councilman Wilson, if I can move forward with the first amendment, and we can do 2 and 3, that way it can be jointly.
You just do it. Let's,
okay.
Because see, this is my reason for asking you to do it, because you have the ability to translate it in Spanish as well. So
okay.
I'm with you.
Okay. Okay. We move to make the following amendments to the Planning Department report, and it also would include the Housing Department. Instruct the Planning Department and Housing Department to study different alternatives that meet the following parameters for a mixed income housing ordinance. A, set aside requirement for rental and or for sale to include the following categories of affordability: moderate, low income, very low, and or extremely low income, or a combination thereof. B, explore incentives for developers beyond the incentives already available under current city laws. C, options to meet requirements would include in lieu fee, on-site, off-site within a defined proximity to the project, and purchasing affordable covenants as prioritized by the Housing Department. D, it should be citywide. E, minimum project size to start between 20 and 50 units. And F, mandatory. Number 2, request the mayor's office to set aside $400,000 in CDBG monies to fund any studies related to the mixed income housing ordinance. And 3, adopt the timeline for the initial environmental study as proposed by the planning department. So, brevemente en español, estamos dirigiendo a los departamentos de planificación y viviendas que empiecen el estudio para poder entender los diferentes alternativos que nos puede traer a cabo un póliza para un mezcla de viviendas que puede reflejar categorías que incluye la capacidad de comprar casas para personas que están en el clase de pocos recursos, tanto como para personas que están en media clase y para personas que ganan muy pocos fondos, personas de bajos recursos. También para establecer y averiguar incentivos para las personas que son compañías de desarrollo, para ver cómo podemos complementar las leyes que ya existen aquí en esta ciudad, para ver cómo tener opciones para requisitos que pueden incluir varias pólizas para mantener acceso a viviendas, que el póliza debe ser para toda la ciudad, que los proyectos que se están incluyendo sean proyectos que son de 20 a 50 unidades y que este póliza sea mandatorio para toda la ciudad. También estamos indicando que la oficina del alcalde pone a un lado $400,000 de fondos del gobierno federal para pagar para este estudio, para estabilizar la ordenancia del mixed income, y que podamos adoptar un calendario para iniciar ese estudio y para que lo pueda proponer el Departamento de Planificación. Perdón mi español, estoy mezclando lo que puedo con mis poco español que entiendo, pero sí son directivas técnicas que pertenecen a las leyes y para pólizas del desarrollo de viviendas. So I basically summarized in Spanish the best that I could, some pretty tough technical terms in Spanish, but I think I got the point across. So that being said, is there anything else we should add to the amendments, council members?
No, that's great. It's pretty inclusive, and I'm particularly happy that you've clearly set forth that this is...
Can you push the on button? There you go. There you go.
I thought that was very inclusive. I'm particularly pleased about the point about it being citywide, and I think this will enable us to have a very candid discussion. I've built a large number of units in Council District 9 that are affordable, low income, and mixed income. I think mixed income provides an opportunity for builders to build and creates a stream of revenue for a building to enable a building to be able to sustain itself over a lifetime. But there are parts in this city where people have not embraced this concept, and I think we're going to have to be extremely honest with each other, and honest also to create a policy that does have some balance so that you hit that tipping point where developers will actually want to build because they see the efficacy of building, and we have to have a policy that's balanced, and I really hope we can achieve that this time.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. It's unfortunate. I wish I had Councilmember Cardenas here because I know he was part of that committee the first time around. Would have been great to have his notes and his observations. So that means, Councilman Woodson, anything else?
No, I think this will go to council next week, and
Yes.
I would hope that this would send a message that we intend to do this, quickly as possible. So let's vote on this, make it official, and next week we'll push it to, step 2.
Great. So I believe that these are the amendments, and they can move forward as a directive to the full council, and that will be the action of the joint committee.
Just before we leave this item, Councilmember, I want to make sure that we are including, or have we considered the Housing Department's recommendation regarding the enforcement? I know the Director of Planning, they both agreed to work on it. Was that intended to be a formal recommendation to Council?
Yes, that would be a formal amendment as part of the report to the full Council.
In terms of monitoring, thank you.
Yes, monitoring, that's very important dynamic. Okay, so that being said, that concludes item number 1. I want to thank my colleagues for their generosity and time and the ability to work together on this very important policy. Thank you, Councilman. Okay, so that leaves us with one last item, and that's for the Planning and Land Use Committee. But I thank my colleagues for their presence. Roberto, you want to read that item that's left?
Actually, there's 2 items, Councilman.
2 items?
One is in closed session, and item 10 is an appeal by Henry and Janice Lasseroff, Donna Black, Kelly Linton, and Williams LLP. This has to do with a whole route in CD 11. CD 5.
Okay, so can we have the staff do the report on this item? And that's item, which number again, Robert?
Item 10, Council.
Item number 10. Good afternoon. Just give us your name, please.
Good afternoon, Cora Johnson, Department of Building and Safety. I am the Board Secretary for the Building and Safety Commission. And we had a haul route hearing on April 21st to export 7,865 cubic yards of earth from the project site. The item was approved by the Commission with a 4-to-1 vote.
Okay.
Is this on? Oh. Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I didn't hear, Council Member, if you advised that this is not the public hearing because we don't have a quorum and the public hearing will be at Council.
Okay, so that being said...
Well, that's what I thought.
I felt it too.
Okay, everybody... We're okay. We're having just a small little hiccup.
Okay.
I think we're okay now. We don't have a slight rumbling. I think we're fine. Okay, so the folks that are here for this item number 10, they should know because I don't have a quorum. This would go forward as a report to the council, and that you'll have the opportunity to speak in front of the full city council. So our brothers Donna R. Black, Kenneth Hardgrove, and Fred Gaines. Do you still feel compelled to speak, given that we're going to have to do this again? Because I'll be moving this item to the council, and we will have the opportunity to speak in front of the full council. Is Donna back here today? Ma'am, would you like to speak in front of the council instead? Because that's going to be where you'll hear the case.
I would be willing to...
Welcome, ma'am, and thank you for your patience.
Yes. You're very welcome. Donna Black, Los Angeles. I would be willing to forego speaking today if all 3 of the participants would forego speaking, and if we could be assured of the same amount of time, whatever that might be, that we would have here to speak in front of the council.
I would be giving, the council would be allowing 2 minutes each, as it is a public hearing. And essentially, that's what it is.
It's the same.
It's a public hearing in front of the council, because if we don't have a quorum,
I understand.
I was going to have to do that anyway.
No, I understand.
But I'm offering you this courtesy because you've been here, you've been waiting.
Well, I understand. And as I say, if the other speakers are going to speak, then I would like the opportunity.
Okay.
If we are all willing to forego that opportunity and put it off until next week, I would be willing to do that as well.
So Fred Gaines and Kenneth Hargrove, are you willing to forego and we'll wait until council? If you say no, then we'll just have the 2 minutes right now and we'll do it again.
I understand. Thank you very much. Kenneth Hargrove, appearing on behalf of the appellant John A. Douglas. I would only like to be heard on one point, and I understand that we would then need to do it again in front of the full City Council. But because of the importance of the issue, I would merely like to say that my client, the appellant, Mr. Douglas, never received notice of the haul route application, never received notice of the official hearing on April 21st, 2009. We have never waived that right of notice. So to the extent that I want the record to continue to reflect that that hearing went forward in the absence of the legally required notice being provided to him, it's crystal clear from the certified list that was provided by the city to my office that the address given for Mr. Douglas, which is 300 Stone Canyon Road, Los Angeles, was not listed on the certified list, and it was actually a non-existent address in Santa Monica, California. And that is the one thing that I wanted to make clear here today, and we will continue to maintain that objection.
Okay.
Based upon that, if for no other reason, we believe that the appeal should be granted, the matter should be sent back, and the applicant should be required to properly notice it as required by law.
Okay.
Thank you.
Given the time it did take, I'd like to offer Ms. Black that opportunity to also have your 2 minutes, since you already did take 2, and you can repeat this again if you would like. It's up to you. Just out of fairness, I'll give everybody a chance to be at the microphone.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman. Donna Black, 1801 Century Park East, Los Angeles, 90067. I'm appearing today on behalf of Janice and Henri Lazaroff. They are appellants. They reside at 333 Copa de Oro Road, adjacent to an abutting property located at 10550 Bellagio Road, which is the subject of this appeal. We respectfully request that you overturn the approval by the Building and Safety Commission of the haul route for approximately 8,000 cubic yards of dirt and adoption of a mitigated negative declaration for an as-yet undefined project. Simply stated, approval of this haul route is a classic case of putting the cart before the horse. The amount of dirt that will need to be removed from the site is in direct proportion to how many houses will be built there, and that is yet to be determined. At the Building and Safety hearing, Mr. Gaines, the owner's attorney, stated that they intended to build 1 house. Another of the owner's representatives has told my clients they intend to build 2 houses. But there is no need for 8,000 cubic yards of grading unless they are in fact planning to build 3 or 4 houses. And they can't do that unless they are allowed to pave over a portion of Stone Canyon Creek that runs throughout the property, which they are currently prohibited from doing. When the parcel map for the property was approved, the West LA Planning Commission was adamant that Stone Canyon Creek, a natural watercourse and a year-round stream that runs through Bel Air, was not to be altered, piped, or disturbed in any way. Despite this, the owners of the subject site have now requested a modification of the parcel map to allow paving over the stream and diverting it into 6-foot pipes that will increase the velocity of the water by more than 80% and cause significant erosion downstream. No date has even been set for the hearing on the parcel map modification. Moreover, one would think it would be unlikely that the request would be granted or even seriously considered, since the city has been working on a stream preservation ordinance to assure greater protection for streams. Until the parcel map modification is decided and the size of the residential development established, no haul route should be approved. There's simply no urgency here, no sign that the owners are about to start construction or have even applied for a grading permit. If the appeal is not granted, then we request that the haul route be conditioned so no hauling is allowed until a decision is made on the parcel map modification. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, the last speaker is Fred Gaines on this issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable members, as I would usually say, Fred Gaines.
We're here in spirit.
Fred Gaines on behalf of the applicant. This is a haul route approval. Some of us, when the council decided to make haul route approvals discretionary and appealable, were worried that people would use them as backhanded ways to oppose projects. That is exactly what you have here. As you heard, you didn't hear one single thing about the haul route, about that the truck should go this way instead of that way, or park here instead of there. What you heard was a whole litany of descriptions by two of our wealthiest citizens who surround this very large 4-acre property in Bel Air as to why their neighbor should wait or be delayed or shouldn't develop their house. This has nothing to do with how much grading. It has nothing to do with the creek, which we are not allowed to touch under the conditions of the parcel map. This has nothing to do with any retaining walls. All the conditions of approval of the haul route are there. There's no complaint about them in terms of hours, in terms of where the trucks can line up, in terms of how the haul route is to operate. That's why the Building and Safety Commission voted to grant it, and we ask that you would deny this appeal. The only other mention I want to make is that at every single hearing we've had on this, going back now several years from when we had the parcel map to now, the one neighbor shows up at the hearing, writes very detailed letters and briefs, and then claims they didn't get notice. This has gone on for 4 years, and I don't know how you can say they didn't get notice. They were at the hearing before the Building and Safety Commission. They filed 25 pages of documents with you. They show up here and say there's no notice. It's just absolutely not the case. All of the regular notice requirements have been followed. So we believe that there's been no error, no mistake made by the Building and Safety Commission, that all the conditions are in place, and we'd ask that you would reject the appeal and allow the haul route approval to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. That concludes the public comment on this item. This will go forward as a report. Because of lack of quorum, we'll have the public hearing again for the full council, and the full council will be making that decision.
You can make a recommendation. It will be a communications. You can make a recommendation on the appeal. It won't go with submit without recommendation, but there will be another public hearing. So you have to take an action.
I could if I wanted to, right?
Yeah. You want to submit it without recommendation?
I'd rather not. I'd just send it forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes this item. I do know we have one more item, which is a closed session item. Is anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we now have to move into closed session, so just the attorneys and that matter will be in this room. Thank you very much.